It's a great pleasure to be here today for our fireside chat, together with Nathan, who's co-founder and CTO of Airbnb. And first of all, please give a big applause for Nathan to be here today. So because we have a tight schedule, I just will say 60 seconds something about our internet business cluster. As you know, for us it's very important to build a digital cluster in Germany after we have seen what comes out of Stanford, Harvard, and other great places in America. And it's very important that we combine the thought leadership here at university with you as outstanding students, together with companies who build something, to create a cluster of people who really drive forward that digital world. I was on the DLD conference, and if you would like to see what happens, it's you can see it on YouTube. It's online streamed. I just can tell you after the last 24 hours, 36 hours we had, it is just unbelievable how fast the speed of change in our society, with the companies we know, with the institutions we know, is accelerating because of the performance of machines, of computers, of smartphones. And it's great that you're studying here at that university with a part of digital, because we need so many ambitious people really to change and develop this society to a digital society, which clearly will it be. So just a few words about the Internet Business Cluster. It is a joint effort. We started 3-4 years ago here, together with ProSiebenSat.1, together with Sapient, together with Tomorrow Focus, to have a dialogue between university and companies and to offer for you internships, research studies and other things that we get in a very good dialogue. We have already some questions at Facebook. If you have a Facebook, if you want to ask questions, we have two ways. If you don't want to raise your hand afterwards, you just can post a question on Facebook, and Michael, who is sitting here, will then read the questions. What I love more is raise your hand and ask many questions after Nathan has finished his presentation. It's a bit different format this time, that we don't have an overall fire chat, but Nathan wanted to show you his vision, what he thinks would be interesting for you. So you will have a presentation of about 20-25 minutes, and then we go in the live chat as always. Just short introduction of Nathan. Nathan, as far as I understood, you come out of Boston. You have studied computer science at Harvard. You started the company very early. You had your first company when you were 12 years old by coding, as far as I understood. Was it 12, 13? 14. And you stay now since 8 years at Airbnb. Fantastic story. If you think about the giants who are standing out there with Booking.com, Priceline, valuation at top 80 billion, and you're there and growing the company forward. And we are really looking to see what your way of the future is in that field. So please start with the presentation, and then we start with the fine chat afterwards.
Thanks very much. What an impressive turnout. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Before we get into the fireside chat and the Q&A, I wanted to give you a little bit of my journey, my personal journey as an entrepreneur, and share with you what it was like during the first year of Airbnb, which is a dramatic contrast to what we are today and all the success that we have today. Hopefully you'll find this story inspiring. So my story did start at a very young age. I was 12 when I learned how to program. I was homesick from school one day, and my dad is an electrical engineer. He had books about computers, and I just took one of the books off the shelf and I started looking through. And this was the beginning of computer programming as a hobby. And I bought books, I studied, and I was posting my work on the internet. And then at the age of 14, I got a phone call. And it was someone who had seen my work on the internet. He said, I want to pay you $1,000 to write me a program. I said, hey Dad, somebody from the internet wants to pay me $1,000. Exactly, he just laughed. He said, son, nobody from the internet's going to pay you $1,000. I said, whatever, I don't care, I'll do it just for fun. I did, and I did get paid $1,000. Better yet, I got introduced to a whole bunch more people who needed similar work done. And this was the beginning of a business that I ran throughout high school and made nearly $1 million doing this. But far more important than that money was the self-confidence that that created in me. Confidence that I could create stuff that people value, and confidence that I could teach myself all the necessary skills. So I ran this business throughout high school, put it on hold to focus at Harvard on computer science, have the college experience. After graduating, I got a normal job, and that only lasted 7 months because the pace of development there as a software engineer was so slow. I just found myself not learning. And so after 7 months, I went to my boss and I said, I'm leaving. He said, oh, you can't leave. You're our most productive engineer, which made me laugh because the reality is that I had an office all to myself. I could close the door and I only had 1 meeting a week. So my schedule was I'd come in and for the first half of the day, I would do my work program. The second half of the day, I'd trade stocks and read on the internet. So when he told me I was the most productive engineer, I said, I really have to leave now. Really have to leave now. And so I left and I went to the West Coast because I had grown up in Boston. I went to the West Coast where I joined a startup company. And I like to say here I learned everything not to do, which is actually incredibly valuable. Despite the success of Airbnb, there's many things that I have done over my journey since 12, many projects I've endeavored on that have ultimately not worked out. And yet every one of those, looking back, has been an incredible learning experience. And so I think that's an important mindset to have, that failure is actually a learning opportunity. If you keep trying again, you'll eventually make it. But when I moved out to San Francisco to join this startup company, I needed a place to stay. And I found this place on Craigslist. And my roommates were Joe and Brian, who are now my co-founders. So we were friends ever before there was a company. And living together, and there's 2 things that I noticed about them by living together. First, our work ethic. We had similar work ethic. After work and on the weekends, we worked incredibly hard on our own projects. Second, they were designers, I was engineers. We ended up helping each other out. We realized we had complementary skills, and we saw how valuable that was in terms of creating product. So that we kind of filed in our heads. But then in the meantime, something happened, which was that the rent on the apartment was raised 25%. I said, that's too expensive, I'm moving out. But the 2 other guys, they wanted to stay, but they had just quit their jobs to become entrepreneurs, also known as unemployed, so they didn't have the money. But they're both designers, like I mentioned before, and they saw that an international design conference was coming to San Francisco. And they saw that all the hotels were sold out. So they got this idea to rent out the extra bedroom in the apartment to designers who might need a place to stay. Now this bedroom had no furniture, had no bed. But Joe pulled out an air bed. And instead of calling it a bed and breakfast, he called it an air bed and breakfast. And that's where the name Airbnb comes from. So this was their bed and breakfast. And they put together a very simple 1 or 2 page website. It's really just a blog. And they found 3 designers to stay there. These designers, they were expecting guys like themselves in their mid-20s. Instead, they had They had a man from India, a 35-year-old woman from Boston, and a father of 4 from Utah. So super eclectic group. Made $1,000, all went to the conference together, had a great time, became friends, and stayed in touch afterwards. And so after this, we really reflected on that experience. And we thought, certainly there must be other people, other situations where we could do the same thing. And this was the inspiration for what became Airbnb. This happened in October 2007, and in January 2008, we set out in earnestness to create Air Bed and Breakfast. Except as the only engineer amongst the 3 of us, I was highly skeptical. I wanted to be very cautious about partnering with 2 designers and being the only engineer. I was like, this sounds like a lot of work. And so Joe and Brian came up with this concept of Air Bed and Breakfast Lite. Because at first they were talking about all these features like verification of phone numbers and Facebook Connect and all these things that we have today, but of course we didn't have back then and were a lot of work subsequently to do. We came up with this concept of Air Bed and Breakfast Lite, and it looked like this. It was just a few pages actually. It was really a classified site. This is different than what we have today. We made it in just 3 weeks, and we launched it in time for South by Southwest, Why? Because this was a big event in Austin, Texas. We knew there need to be alternatives for accommodation. And it's where Twitter had launched the year before. So we thought, this is our moment to launch and go big at South by Southwest. Super excited. We got maybe a dozen different bedrooms and air mattresses on the website. And 2 people actually stayed on them. One was Brian, our co-founder. Brian had an interesting experience. That started off well. He landed at the airport, the host picked him up, brought him to the apartment. His wife had made them dinner. The air mattress was set up. There was a chocolate on the pillow. Everything was great. But at the end of the night, the host asked Brian, do you have the money? Because this was before we facilitated a transaction or before we had reviews. It was just a classified site. So the host asked Brian, do you have the money? And Brian said, oh, sorry, can I bring you the money tomorrow? I need to go to the ATM. The host said, hey, no problem. So now it's the next night, and the host asked Brian again, were you able to get the money? And Brian had forgotten, again, to go to the ATM. And suddenly, the hospitality kind of wore off. The host started thinking to himself, who is this guy in my living room that I met through the internet and is now conveniently forgetting to pay me? And so things got uncomfortable. But out of that experience came a revelation to us, which is, why don't we try to take care of the money up front? Maybe we can make it just as easy to book someone's home as a hotel, meaning you can actually search instead of going to classifieds with availability. You can pay through the website. So we had this vision of 4 clicks to book it. And so once we got back from South by Southwest, we set out on a new expanded vision. Instead of taking 3 weeks to build this, we took 3 months. And we added payments, we added reviews. This is actually what it looks like. This was the 3 clicks to book it. Meaning you do a search, you see search results, you see a profile, you click book it. Simple experience. These are some of the early screenshots. You can see the similarities and the differences. Mostly differences. And so along the way, we were getting advice. This is Michael Seibel. He was co-founder of Justin.tv, another Y Combinator company. A company that was just a year ahead of us, and we really looked up to. And he gave us advice and told us that he knew investors that would be willing to write a $50,000 check over dinner. I said, wow! I mean, this is all news to us. And so we got really excited. But when he took a closer look at the product, he realized that perhaps we had been exaggerating how much progress we had actually made. And so he said, well, I'm going to build these features, and then I'll make the introductions. Okay? So eventually, we build the features. It takes a while. And he starts making the introductions. And so we start having meetings with investors. And in one meeting, Joe and Brian go down to Sand Hill Road, which is about an hour south of San Francisco. And by the way, I hear this story much later, because I was in Boston at the time. So they go, and by the way, they were telling me everything was going really well, that investors were really interested. So let me tell you what really happened, and what I learned after the fact. In one such meeting, they went down to University Cafe on Sand Hill Road and met with the investor. The investor ordered a smoothie. And Brian begins to pitch the investor. After about 5 minutes, the investor gets up and walks out, but leaves the smoothie half drunk. And so Brian says, oh, Brian thought to himself, maybe he's putting money in the parking meter. And so they wait, but he never came back. This is actually the real picture of Brian waiting, perplexed, for the investor to return. And I think this actually captures what people were thinking at the time, which was, this was not something that investors could relate to. They said, this is not something I would do. They said, I can't imagine there are many people who would do this, and that it's a good market. And surely it's not safe. So this is what every investor was thinking. But of course, the guys never told me this, because I was in Boston, and they wanted me thinking optimistically and not to give up. So on another such meeting, I was in San Francisco, and we went together to a VC, and we got to do this all over again. And the night before, we were going through the slide deck, and we come to a slide like this. And this slide basically says, after 3 years, we're going to be making $200 million in revenue. And I do some quick math, and it comes out to something like 30,000 transactions a day. I say, that's not realistic. In three years, we'll never be at that volume. It's not credible. We should change 200 million to 20 million. And so Brian says, okay, that's fine, we'll do that. So the next day, we're presenting this at the VC firm, and we come to this slide. And they changed it. And they changed it to this. And so afterwards, I said, Brian, what were you doing? What was that all about? said, well, after we spoke, I called up Sam Altman, who now runs Y Combinator and was also a mentor to us. And he told me that investors don't want M's, they want B's, baby. Based on that, Ryan changed 200 million to 2 billion and presented. And needless to say, the investor was not convinced. That meeting didn't go very well either. So now we're ready to launch our kind of expanded product that makes it just as simple to book someone's home as a hotel. And we choose this historic event to do it. This is the Democratic National Convention in August of 2008. This is where Barack Obama received the nomination of his party to be the presidential candidate. A historic moment in the US. And it's happening in this stadium, this football stadium that holds 80,000 people. And so we know it's going to be at this event. We know this is the perfect launch opportunity because Denver only has 17,000 hotel rooms. There's going to be a real need for alternatives. And sure enough, there were. Locals were looking to get out of town and make an extra buck based on this opportunity. And all these supporters who were coming to town on their own dime were looking for places to stay. And so within 2 weeks, we got 800 rooms available on our site. And meanwhile, the media is doing stories about how there's no place to stay. So we wrote to the bloggers, the local newspapers. And by the end of the week, we had been interviewed by all of them. And we're even on CNN International talking about what this Air Bed and Breakfast concept was. It was amazing way to launch your company. It was extremely exciting. A couple hundred people probably stayed over that weekend. But guess what? When it was all over, no one cared. And that, I think, summarizes what it is like to launch your company, which is, this is kind of a graph of what your emotions are like over time. Okay? Before you launch your company, you're getting more and more excited, right? And then your excitement peaks on the launch day, and hopefully you get covered on TechCrunch or something like that. But then you realize a week later, you're old news. And this begins what is known as the Truffle Sorrows. A very long period of despair where you work really hard and it doesn't matter. And to make things worse, this is now September 2008, and it's the beginning of the recession. And so Sequoia Capital, who's now one of our investors, but then was only someone who could dream of investing, sends out this notice to all their portfolio companies saying it's going to be impossible to raise fundraising and you should lay off staff and really save your money. And so now, no investors want to talk to us for sure. And this is when we get incredibly creative and a little bit wacky. You got to remember, our name was Air Bed and Breakfast. And so we come up with this concept to do this presidential, political kind of gimmick around the breakfast part of our name and create a presidentially themed cereal. We were thinking to ourselves, how can we leverage all those reporters we met during our launch in Denver? They're political reporters, they're not tech reporters. How can we be relevant to them? And we thought if we email them, they'll just delete the email. We got this idea to create a presidentially themed cereal. You have to remember, my co-founders are designers. So they were able to come up with all this original artwork, all this witty humor. They were able to get boxes printed. We got 500 of each box printed. And not just Obama O's, I'm hoping every poll, but we also created Captain McCain's, an average number, but he's the other candidate, a Republican candidate. So we were bipartisan. And we sent a box of each to 100 different reporters. And we said, if they get this in the mail, they're going to have to call us back. And you know what? Sure enough, they did. And, oh, actually, before I tell you what happened, let me just show you the process. There's 500 boxes of each. The first 100 got mailed to reporters. The other 400 of each we sold on our website for $40 a box, and we called it a limited edition collector's item to justify that price. Of course, no one was willing to produce cereal for us. We actually had to go to the supermarket and basically buy a lot of cereal and repackage it into the boxes that we're hot gluing together. So this is a very manual operation. This is what our apartment looks like. But guess what? Those political reporters did call us. And we got back on CNN talking about what we were doing. And that day we were on CNN, we became the #1 political video of the day. And as a result, we sold a box of cereal every 3 minutes for $40. By the end of the week, we had sold out of Obama O's, made $30,000, far more than we had ever through our main business. I mean, we were thinking if there was an election every month or something, this could be a real business. I mean, seriously, it's like, this was the dream. The dream. But alas, there's not an election every month. It's every 4 years. And we're now at the end of 2008, and we're a year without jobs, a year of paying rent, and despite all our efforts, things are not going well. And so we have a conversation about when is it time to quit, right? When do you draw the line? We had a realization, which is that although we had been working really hard, we still hadn't given it 100% yet. And we said, you know what, before we can quit, we have to give it 100%. And so this is when we decided to apply to Y Combinator, because it's an 11-week program. Hopefully the batteries don't fall out of this. It's an 11-week program. We'll join it, and at 11 weeks, if it's not going materially better, we can quit and know we gave it our best. But first, we had to pass the interview. And so the interview format, when you show up in person, it's 5 minutes max. And within about 2 minutes into the interview, Paul Graham, who runs the program, said, "What? People do this? I don't believe it." And he said, then used the remainder of our 3 minutes to basically convince us to do something else. And so we ran out of time super quick and really hadn't gotten our message across. And we're walking out the door. And as we walk out, Joe pulls out of his backpack a box of Obama-Os and gives it to Paul Graham. And Paul Graham says, "I don't understand, you bought me a gift?" And we said, "No, we made this." He said, "I don't understand. Come back into my office and tell me how you made this." And so we tell him this story I just shared with you. And you know what? He said afterwards, "I never believed in your idea, but I believed in you as founders." He says, "In founders, what I look for is resilience. Those people who can survive and create. And it doesn't matter what the idea is, because the idea can change." That's a funny way of saying it. Anyways, we get accepted to Y Combinator. And this begins a period of high intensity where I sleep on the floor in Joe's bedroom. We all live together. We wake up at the same time. We go to bed at the same time. We work all day, 6 days a week. We take off about 4 hours a day to shower, cook meals, buy groceries, go to the gym. Everything else is work. Highly disciplined. And you have to remember, we're in the recession. So one of the things Paul Graham told us was that investors are going to care about profitability. So define what that means and achieve it. So we came up with this concept of ramen profitability, which was basically enough money to pay rent and buy ramen soup noodles. So that was our definition of profitability. It was $1,000 a week. We started making $200 a week. We had this goal, and every week we would plot our revenue. And we put this chart up everywhere in the apartment, in the middle of the mirror, in the bathroom, over the fireplace, etc. And we were hyper-focused on revenue. We got some advice during this period. One piece of advice was that it's better to have 1,000 users that love you than 1,000,000 users that like you. Really go find your evangelists, identify them. And Paul Graham says, go meet your users. Despite Y Combinator being an 11-week program, and despite the fact that you have no money, you should go to New York and meet every single one of your users. And we really needed that encouragement because we didn't have the money to do this. But we made it happen. And this is when things really took off. We went to New York and we met every single user, all 40 of them. There weren't that many. It wasn't that hard. And our trick was to call them and say, we have a professional photographer in town. Would you like free pictures of your apartment to have? And I think people were a little surprised, but they ultimately said yes. And then they'd get a knock on the door, and it was Joe or Brian, co-founders of the company. But they had rented a professional camera, and they took the pictures. They sat with the host at the computer, taught them how to use the website, got product feedback. Later, they'd invite them out for beer. And over beer, we'd tell them our entrepreneurial story of this past year. And at the end of hearing that story, they were rooting for us. They really wanted us to succeed. And we had built a certain level of rapport and trust, such that they then allowed us to suggest that they charge less money for their listing. A lot of people wanted $400 a night, which, yes, that is what hotels charge. But given what people were offering and how new the idea was, we said, well, $75 might be more like it. But they wanted us to succeed, and so they said yes. And they let us curate the listings. And so after setting the prices and helping to write the text and taking the pictures, we had a lot of properties that looked fantastic. A lot being 40, but it's a start. But 40 was enough because people from around the world want to go to New York and are looking for alternatives. And they started getting bookings. And the hosts...
We just changed the micro because there's overpriced. Okay. I give my one. I'm very sorry about the second world technology in this university. Really. Not amused. Can you just... If your mama, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry for that.
Intermission.
Zweite Welt.
Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, you want me to use that? You want me to hold this one? All right, this too loud? Like this? Okay. Cool. Just make sure the battery's up on it. I'll hold it together. So we have 40 properties in New York, great prices, great photos, and they start getting bookings. And so hosts start making money, start meeting cool people from around the world, and start telling their friends. And their friends come to the site, they see the high quality of property, and they emulate that. And so more and more properties are now being posted in New York. And meanwhile, people are coming from around the world, staying in New York, having positive experiences, and then going home and telling their friends. And so very quickly, there's a global cross-pollination that begins. And if you look at the data, it starts to look something like this. And you can see how this evolved over time. So a massive global network effect starts to play out, bringing us to basically where we are today, with 2 million homes now around the world, basically doubling over the past year. On New Year's Eve, we had over 1 million guests staying in other people's homes on a single night. 70 million guests have used Airbnb today. And just 8 years ago, everyone thought this was a terrible idea. And so it's amazing to see how quickly things can change and how persistence can pay off. And of course, we can talk about more recently the developments, but I wanted to share that first year story because it is such a different story than what you hear about today and all of our success. So thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you very much for this We have to change it next time, believe me, otherwise we won't do it again. I'm sorry. Okay, so the first question I have, thank you very much for the great presentation you showed in the story. It's a great story. But my first question is a crucial one. Where did you stay tonight? In a hotel?
No, of course not. I stay in an Airbnb always. I'm going to mispronounce the neighborhood name, but is it Glaukenbach? Yeah. Yes, right along the river.
Okay. So you have started your business life very early by with your engineer. He explained you took out the book and started it. But what was he? I mean, we have thousands of people who start coding very early. Where did that entrepreneurial drive you had to build a business out of it? Where did it come from? You have an explanation for that?
Well, I was really fortunate to get that phone call and to help channel that energy and what was a hobby into something that was actually a business, which was one thing. But I think also growing up, my dad always kind of taught us a kind of a can-do attitude and was always encouraging us to think kind of entrepreneurially and making sure that if we wanted something and needed money, that we were kind of doing work to justify that. And so I was always incredibly kind of motivated.
Mm-hmm. If you see today as an entrepreneur, you still run the company since 8 years with your 2 other founders together. About what are you fighting if you have a fight between the 2 others? What are the discussions you have where you say, I don't need that?
Well, the 3 of us are actually incredibly different. And that's both makes it hard, but actually is our strength. And so, the one difference is I'm an engineer, they're designers, so that's a difference. But even personality-wise, we're quite different. But what we realized early on is that despite the conflict that creates, if we spend the extra time explaining our different perspectives and reaching a compromise, we realized that those compromises were the best solutions to the problem. And so we saw value, even if it was a longer conversation and sometimes frustrating. And funny enough, a few years later, we did this kind of personality survey where they plot your personality on a circle. And our personalities are exactly 120 degrees apart from each other on a circle. Meaning if you drew a triangle, it'd be like an equilateral triangle. So we couldn't be more different. Yeah, I think that's our strength.
But if you are so different, how many times have you thought just I go out, I don't want to continue this discussions, I do something else because we are so differently?
Yeah, no, I think we drove each other pretty crazy in the early days. But we were friends and we stuck together and we had a vision for what we thought was possible.
And you're friends still today?
Yes, and it's actually, that's not to be, that's no small feat, because if you look at other companies where there were 3 founders, I can't think of any where all 3 founders stuck through 8 years. Usually 1 or 2 peels off, and yet the 3 of us are more excited than ever and more focused than ever.
Okay, so for you as a founder, what is a typical day for you? What happens?
Now my day is a lot of meetings. I like to say my role really changes probably every 6 months. In the very beginning, I was the only engineer, and so I did all the coding for the first year and a half, and then focused on hiring a team, and then running the engineering team, and then the analytics team, and the payments, and the online marketing, all these things technical. But then eventually we were able to hire really talented executives who had far more skill running teams than I did. And so stopped doing that, but that freed me up then to kind of be more strategic across the company and use my understanding of the technology and of the data and the history of the company and kind of the moral authority of being the co-founder to help resolve big issues in the company. Issues that might be falling between different functions or leaders or be too big for like a hired executive to deal with. So that's meant different things at different times. Right now I'm heading up everything having to do with our hosts in our homes and vacation rentals and working more closely with our international teams. But that's all new in the last few months, and I'm sure 6 months from now will be something else.
Okay. But 8 years is a long time, a lot of change. So you started with 3 people, and today your organization has how many altogether?
Over 2,000, about 2,400.
And in your section, in charge for international and for the homes, how many people are working?
That would be about
approximately
200.
200. So with your competences you had, you never started working for a big company who trained you like many corporates do. You did all your stuff. If you have experienced executives now in your organization, how do you make sure that they accept you from competence field if they are very experienced and you as a founder might learn everything yourself, as you said before, do it, learn it, and do it by learning?
Yeah, well, I think part of the reason for hiring executives is because you want them to take some of those things over, and frankly, they are much more qualified to do many of the things that they do. And so, on my part, there's been recognition for the need to delegate and to always be kind of putting yourself out of a job and identifying, what is the next place in the company where you can, as a co-founder, uniquely add value and not necessarily do something that someone else can do. So you can't become too attached to any one thing. You're trying to build a scalable organization.
Okay. If we're talking today about your company and you look in the future, this year, next year, what can we expect from Airbnb after you have shown the chart that we already covered the whole world? It was almost very white, lots of transactions, lot of house. What can we expect as next for the next 24 months?
No one knows how big this can be. No one thought it could be anything to begin with, and every year I think we've surpassed expectations, and last year surpassed even our own expectations. And in fact, the business has not decelerated at all over the last year. So we're starting this year with kind of an incredibly strong place. We think there's plenty of room for growth, even in our most mature markets here in Europe, for example. More than half of our business is based out of Europe. But we're also seeing our fastest growth coming from Asia. China was our fastest growing country last year as a source of travelers, 700% growth last year. I can't even believe that. I've seen a lot of things, but I can't believe that. So I think that's just a remarkably exciting story, especially when so many tech companies are not successful in China, at least Western ones, because it is very competitive and different.
Beyond, they don't like, what can I say? Chinese usually tend not to like international companies, even American or European.
There's a big cultural difference, and it's very competitive. It's extremely competitive. I haven't seen anything like it. So we see more growth in different places, but particularly Asia. We see opportunity in new categories such as business travel. So most people think of Airbnb for leisure, but we're actually seeing 10% of our travelers use it for business. And we think by further improving the product, we can actually increase that percentage. So that's something we're focused on making even better. Vacation rentals. We're having more and more vacation rentals and kind of luxury properties available in those types of markets. So that's a growth opportunity. And then longer term, we're thinking about how can we take our innovation in the accommodation space and apply it more broadly to the entire trip. We know that our travelers want to travel more authentically. They want to connect with people. They want to connect with their surroundings. So how can we add value outside of the home by leveraging our host community? Our host community is incredibly loyal, incredibly passionate. We like to think of them as micro-entrepreneurs. So what we've done is basically built a platform which is a toolkit for them to be entrepreneurs, and right now they provide the house. But what can they provide outside the house? So this is something we're exploring.
I mean, when you say you're scaling now over the planet, how do you organize your management team meetings with your co-founders and your management team? Do you have a monthly fixed meeting? Is it all over computers, flexible? How are you organizing Airbnb inside?
It's all of the above. We have a weekly executive meeting, and that's about 13 people. It's rather large, where we spend a couple hours each week reviewing kind of the tactical metrics, but also reserving some time for some more strategic conversations. Every quarter we get together kind of the next level of management, a group of about 60 people from around the world, and we do like a full day activity where we review different aspects of the business. But this is constantly evolving. It has to. As you get bigger, we've had to put a lot more focus on communication. There was a time when it was Joe, Brian, and I sitting around the same table, and you never had to think about communication. But suddenly when you don't all fit around the same table anymore, not everyone knows the same things. And you have to get really deliberate. And I think there was a low period, maybe around the time of 2012, where we weren't communicating well enough, but we had added hundreds of people. And we've really had to make that a focus, and we've come a long way since then. But I think that's something that can easily go underestimated the importance of.
But how do you keep the culture with all the growth? You just said several times in your interview that it's very important to keep a lively culture of change, of drive. How do you keep that culture you had as founders when you started, now where you're scaling this size of company?
Well, you have to be really specific about what your culture is, and very deliberate. So before we even hired our first employee, we wrote down a set of core values by which we wanted to interview all new hires. And to this day, we interview every single employee against their core values. We actually have people in the company who specialize in giving that kind of interview. And so all 2,400 employees have gone through the screening process. And it's not just getting in the door, but it's then about reinforcing the core values through the actions that you do. Just as an example, our core values are 6 things. The first is champion the mission. Really believe in the power of home sharing to bring people together. Second is be a host, really speaking to being open and providing hospitality. Embrace the adventure, really speaks to kind of the story I told you and kind of the ups and downs. Every frame matters is really a design principle, to think very holistically about problems. Simplify is kind of another principle that's design related. And the 6th one is...
Let's work day and night.
That used to be one. We used to have one Olympic animal, but that dropped out when we went from 10 to 6. Olympic animal. Serial entrepreneur, relating to the story I shared up there, which is basically work under constraints and kind of embrace novelty based around the serial story.
So it changes all the time.
Yes.
Which is part of it. So first round of questions. Any questions from you? I'm not sure whether we have a mic to ask you. There's a question. Please stand up, just say your name, and be loud, please.
Hi Nathan, my name is Wolfgang Tech, and I'm a third-year management team at LU. I was just wondering if you could talk a little about the importance of thinking globally, and more specifically some of the unique challenges that you faced when it came to entering the Asian market as opposed to the European one.
The world is such a big place, and today about 3/4 of our properties are outside of the U.S., and more than 2/3 of our revenue come from outside the U.S. Half of that revenue is in Europe. So thinking globally has been incredibly powerful for Airbnb, and we've established this global network effect that makes all aspects of our business stronger. So it's been super important. We really made an emphasis on this starting in 2011, and we opened up local offices so that we could be incredibly close to our customers and build up the necessary trust, since home sharing does require a bit of leap of faith. And so we got really close to the customers. starting in 2011 and bootstrapping different markets. Our focus on Asia came a little bit later. It started probably in late 2012. And about 2 years ago, we started our focus on China, which is now paying off so well. You know, I always wondered if this would work in Asia. I thought it might not, because it is such a different culture. I was been amazed to see actually that it could become part of our fastest growing countries. I think the mentality of travel is actually fairly kind of universal and global in nature. People's desire to meet other people and kind of understand how they live. I think it's a really powerful one, and it's one that all of our early adopters subscribe to. For China specifically, there have been some higher hurdle in terms of what we've had to do with the product. China's a huge country with their own internet ecosystem. And so for every kind of Western online product we're familiar with, they have their equivalent, which is usually by far the dominant one. And so we had to do a lot of customization of our product. First, tuning the performance to work over the Chinese firewall, but then integrating with the local social networks like Weibo and WeChat, integrating with their app stores, which are different than what we have. Payments, integrating with Alipay and these. So there's a lot of kind of foundational work we had to do just to make the product work. But once we did that, we saw a rapid acceleration in our growth.
Probably someone has a door. Just press the button again. We'll see what the light goes on. It works. Okay. So the question behind, with such a large organization, just coming back to the question, how you made the decision to go to China, to Asia, how do you organize innovation in your company? Is there a process in which you say everyone has to behave like an entrepreneur? How do you drive? Are there small teams? When I forward today from Amazon said you always need pizza teams who do innovations. Pizza team means only so many people who can eat one pizza should be in the team to do a really great innovation. How is Airbnb organizing the innovation process and makes decisions to change the platform in a new direction?
It's always evolving. There's a few principles that we found useful. You know, one is to have kind of a portfolio approach where 70% of the product roadmap is focused on kind of near-term sure bets, and then 30% is reserved for longer term. And that's actually broken down to 20 and 10%, where 10% is like really kind of far-fetched things. That's one approach. A second approach has been to identify just a couple things that we think are truly transformative and identify those up front and really put together an all-star team around that and kind of segregate that from the other trade-offs within the company and just give that ample time and space to kind of incubate. So we have a couple projects going through that right now. It's a challenge. I mean, as you become a bigger organization, you're always encouraging your employees to take big bets because as an employee, it's not always safe to create big bets, right? You just want to do what's expected with high degree of confidence, right? Because you might think you have a lot to lose. And so we've really wanted to try to stress to employees that you won't be blamed for failure. We want to promote risk-taking. Of course, we want to have a conversation up front about, is that a risk worth
How much is the risk?
Yes, and that's not easy to quantify. But we really do want employees to get excited about things that might not ultimately work out.
Mm-hmm. I think we've got a couple of questions. Michael, do you want to add one of the couple of ones which are interesting?
Yes, so we do have some questions from our online audience. Peter was super curious a couple of days ago already whether you would use a different technology and components if you would rebuild the platform today again.
So the website was originally built on Ruby on Rails and MySQL and Amazon Web Services. And that's still the majority of it, although some of the kind of most high performance components have been rewritten to Java. So search, for example, which has to be very fast and is very complex, had to get rewritten. And so there's actually a lot of different technologies in the stack, but the Ruby on Rails is still there. It's still the dominant piece of it. And we're still on Amazon Web Services. So no real regrets.
And how many engineers do you have in your company, approximately?
300.
300, okay. And how do you coordinate the different project groups? If you have ideas over the groups, you probably have an agile organization, like most companies have, with teams of 10.
Yeah, so there's probably about 15 or 20 teams, roughly 10 to 15. however that math breaks down. And they're focused on different aspects of the product or kind of different business objectives. Everything that's happening in a company is organized under 10 business objectives. And that's part of our kind of our weekly OKRs, and it's a way to really simplify and bring focus and prioritization to everything that's happening.
Who makes that prioritization between the different product tools?
Well, I organize it all, but we collectively, as an executive team, make the decisions about like what's first on that list.
The
And
management
what's,
team overall.
yes. But
Okay. Okay. Further question. Lots of hands. I just go in the very back.
Thanks. Brian tells this story about the beginning that when you guys were struggling and he talked to his grandpa and the grandpa goes, like, don't worry, Brian, 70 years ago, everyone felt like this. No one was saying anything. Do you have like a similar story like from your family or your friends when you guys were, in the Truffle Sorrows, when you talked to your dad or your dad gave you, enthusiasm to keep going?
Well, part of the first question, where did you get the idea from to be an entrepreneur? It's a very similar question.
Well, there's maybe a second part, which is I think it was a few years later after we started, and by a lot of measures things were going well. And my dad, I was home for this, not home for the summer, but I was visiting over the summer, and he asked the question like, how much longer do you think you're going to do this? Kind of like suggesting that maybe there would be better things I should be doing with my time, because for him, this concept of allowing strangers in your home took a really long time to kind of digest. And so I don't think he thought it was a very serious thing until we raised $100 million at a $1 billion valuation. And then he sat down in a lawn chair and had a beer, and it's like, wow.
Did you send him a check? Did you send your father a check back and said, check, you gave him some money, now I give you some money?
Well, I was financially independent since the age of 14, so I paid for university and such. But we go on some nice vacations together now, so there's that benefit.
That's a lot. Question here.
Hi, I'm Mark. I'm co-founder of Usually. We're a startup from Munich and we're trying to go to Airbnb for product. So you guys are actually role models. Where do you see in general the sharing economy going for other things? Is it only flats, or how do you think the mentality of people that you probably helped changing will go?
It's a question of the future of sharing economy.
Yeah, we've seen the sharing economy applied to so many different verticals, and some of those have done well, and others have not. I think some of the ones that are doing reasonably well is like things like dog vacay, where you're sharing your pets. There's sites that allow you to share boats. I think that's reasonably successful. There's a lot of sites that allow you to kind of share your skills online, share experiences. I love the crowdfunding stuff, if you count that. And the tasks as well. There's things that haven't worked, but I wonder if those things might work sometime in the future, when there's more kind of acceptance of the sharing model and there's more of a critical mass that could be used to bootstrap some of these businesses. I think some of these concepts maybe came a little bit too early, where there just was too much friction for them to really take off. But maybe
just make one example. What do you think? What could take
off? Well, the one that comes to mind is the sharing the tools. So the classic example of sharing the power drill that only gets used 3 minutes over its entire life and otherwise sits in your garage. But from my understanding, those types of tools haven't really been successfully shared at scale. But it's just such a waste. I got to think someday this might be possible. Maybe when that's combined with some combination of Postmates, autonomous vehicles that do the delivery of these things.
I think that is probably one of the best examples we will see once the cars start driving automatically.
It solves the last mile problem, yeah.
With that, just imagine, I don't know how you see the world, but my feature is that I could hook on an automatic driving car within Munich. That would be enough, because I see my wife and our kids being driven around all the time. We would be the first to do a subscription model for 40 or 100 euros. That's what we are talking about, that your kids are driving around automatically through Munich. Just think what that would change for all of us, for the economy of the car producing society, for pollution, which would go down with the use of car. 97% of our times cars are not used. It's clear that there is a huge market once these kind of projects are running, and they will run. They will run. It's just a question of 5 to 10 years until we have the...
And it's really a platform. It's a transportation platform upon which many other services are now possible if kind of last mile delivery can be really cheap and really quick without traffic.
Yeah, and I mean, the people who are doing these kind of businesses, if you think about what is happening now with the car sharing in large cities, how many people are today using these kind of platforms? I mean, who's using here in the room? Raise your hand. Who's using one of the car share models here? I mean, this is a very large number. I tell you, when I studied at university 20 years ago, almost everyone had a car or didn't share. And that's something new. And just think about all these students who already are used to share cars. If you get a subscription model, the model will be very different. And that will clearly raise, and it will disrupt this society who's built on cars and a lot of industries behind cars, like in America and others, who will have some challenges. Nathan, one question, if you could give these students here one advice you would like to throw to them, the most important thing you can tell them, what would that be?
Well, I think that the primary lesson from my story is persistence, and always challenge yourself. Always make sure you're learning. I was fortunate enough to be able to challenge myself from a very young age, and over time that really, I think, built up to something that prepared me well. But I think it's also really easy to fall into situations where you're not being challenged, like I found myself. But after 7 months, decided I needed to go elsewhere. So I think just make sure you're always learning whatever it is that you do. And you don't have to go out and be an entrepreneur right away. Go challenge yourself somewhere else. But just make sure that when you stop being challenged, that you find something new to learn.
And you still live this value today?
Yeah, I think through my ever-changing role, which
Okay.
is, I as soon as I can find someone else to do it, let someone else do it, and then ask myself, what is it that I can uniquely contribute that is most important for the company? And it always ends up being something that I'm frankly probably not qualified to do, but neither is anyone else, so it works out.
And I just referred to public information, Nathan. I mean, in the internet, we can read that you are worth 3 billion, your net value.
On paper, yeah.
On paper, fair, more than fair. But I mean, even with all the investors who would like to come in, Airbnb is a very attractive company. What drives you personally? What's the reason that you, after 8 years, you still stay and you take the money I'm sure you could get on the secondary when new investors would come in and would pay, I paid not 3 billion, but I pay you an evaluation 100 million, 200 million.
I think the price will go up, so I'll wait.
But what drives you not to take that?
I think it's just the ability to build things that I think change the world for the better, that people want and value. I mean, I think the most rewarding part of my job now is to travel to far off places, whether it's here or Beijing or wherever, and talk to hosts. And I ask them, what does this mean to you? Is it important to you, and how so? I hear the most incredible personal stories about how this digital product that I created actually changed someone's real offline life, and that it gives you a great feeling. And I just think there's still so much more possibility. We have a much bigger vision, and so we've never been better positioned to kind of pursue that.
So with all the valuation, you're 100% hooked on Airbnb. No plans to drop out.
I mean, frankly, not much has changed over years. 8 years goes by really quick when you're focused, and just still incredibly focused on work. I do have a daughter now, so that's one thing that's changed in my life. That's really the only biggest change. She's 15 months old, and it's been a great experience.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that. Another question over there.
Yeah, I have a question. When you were at the Y Combinator kind of starting out, I'm guessing they set you up with a bunch of VC meetings. And I was wondering, how did you go about choosing your first VC? Were you picky? Were you looking for VCs that were involved in management?
Question is how to choose the VC.
Sure. I mean, our process was a little bit unique. So at Y Combinator, every Tuesday night, there's a guest speaker. And so 1 week it was Greg McAdoo from Sequoia Capital. And Paul Graham told Greg, he's like, you got to meet these guys. He called us the Airbeds. You got to meet the Airbeds. He said they're the best in the class. And so we were lucky enough to get 20 minutes kind of privately with Greg, and we showed him what we were doing. And it turns out that he had been studying kind of vacation rental type businesses for a couple of years. He's really interested in that space, but he was really looking for a company to do it differently. And so when he saw what we were doing, he's like, let me see if I get this straight. And he basically pitched the company back to us but like way better. And we're like, yeah, exactly what you said. So we were really fortunate that he saw it right away when others didn't.
So it wasn't a pitch. Actually, it wasn't a pitch. It
It
was by
wasn't-
accident.
No, he saw it immediately, and he kind of helped us to succeed. And within 2 weeks, we closed Sequoia, which is record speed. It was only 600,000, but still, that's very fast. And for us, we had a negative experience a few months earlier when we had been trying to raise money. We actually did find one investor who almost gave us money, but we pulled out in the last minute because we kind of got bad vibes about what it would be like to work with him. And after that kind of experience, we thought we need to be really careful about who our investors are. And so the idea that we now had an opportunity to take money from Sequoia, which is one of the top firms in the world, and highly respected, and run by folks who have operated all their own companies. We were just so lucky. And ever since then, we've had an incredibly high bar for our investors. We've really been choiceful. We've never been back into a situation where we have to take money from someone we don't want to, because that's a long-term relationship. And we're really lucky today because of it, because none of our investors are asking for their money back. We all told them up front, we have a really big vision, we have a long time horizon, so don't go giving us money if you want it back in 5 years or 8 years. So you gotta wait at least 10 years.
Yeah, we had a discussion last night when I asked you, what is your vision for the company? And you said, we think about 10 years, rather 10 years than 1 year, and all our investors do. But any plans for an IPO, anything like that?
Nothing in the short term. I mean, one day it's probably somewhat inevitable, but nothing in the short term. It doesn't really help us with our near-term goals. We're incredibly well-financed as it is. So we're just going to keep focused on the core business.
Are you looking at competitors? You see, for example, the company we mentioned before, Booking.com, who has changed the planet on the ability to book a hotel directly, especially over smartphones, a fantastic experience. Are you looking at these kind of competitors analytically, that you analyze them, you look at their products, or are you just doing it your way, how you think the best way is?
There's maybe 3 different buckets of kind of competitors. First are those that kind of were direct clones of us. And because of the large network effects and our head start, those largely have not succeeded and most have disappeared. The second is kind of adjacent categories like vacation rentals that existed long before Airbnb, and you're seeing a lot of consolidation in the vacation rental market. HomeAway just got bought by Expedia. And so now you're left with a few really large travel companies. Expedia, TripAdvisor, Priceline, and Google's increasingly getting into this game. So I think it'll be interesting because increasingly these 4 companies are going to come head to head. So I would expect some competition, but today it really hasn't been an issue, and it's not something we really focus on. We really just focus on differentiating ourselves, and that personal hospitality, those local experiences, that's our competitive advantage. That's something that none of the other companies have. And so we're not necessarily looking to get into their space. We're just looking to do what we do. And
You focus on your business, and you don't read the business reports they publish.
Yeah, we're not looking in the rearview mirror. We're not trying to copy what our competitors do. We just have our vision. We try to follow that, and so far that's worked out well.
Great. Another question? It's over here.
Yeah, I was wondering, you structured your thoughts all around the journey of traveling, basically. And I was wondering, since there's a lot of people who use Airbnb as a start when they get into a new city like Munich or Paris, to actually, because it's so hard to get an apartment, to use that in the beginning. Are you looking at that as well? Or?
It's a great use case. Basically, a common use case for Airbnb is if you're new to a city, before you commit to a long-term lease, why not try staying in a few different neighborhoods to see which one you prefer, and also take your time finding the right apartment. I mean, normally you'd be under a lot of time pressure to make a commitment, and usually from far away, and it's hard to make those big decisions. So we do see a lot of that. I think it's a great use case.
Question over here. Ina.
Hi. I have a question regarding risk management. When you go to markets like China, obviously hosts are very open and they like people to stay with them. But do you do deals with the government because it can be off within seconds? And especially if you go to the Middle Eastern market, how do you do the risk management in that?
Yeah. We don't have any deals with government, nor the Chinese government. But listen, that's something we have to be 100% on top of anyways, because the whole concept is built on trust. And so, there's some basic things like the reviews and the payments that help to align incentives and make the right things happen and avoid kind of common scams. On the other hand, there's a lot of sophisticated technology on the back end doing machine learning, looking at data patterns, and flagging things that don't look right for manual review. We have about 200 people who work in our trust and safety group that can manually look at things that are flagged by machine learning. So it's things like that we use just generally to kind of stay on top and make sure folks are having a good experience.
3 final questions. So, over there.
During your growth from 3 people to where you are now, which decisions were particularly difficult or unintuitive or scary?
Unintuitive or scary? Actually, one that's maybe very relevant is in the early days when we were looking for growth, we very quickly realized that there are professionals in the market that are renting apartments. And we said, oh, we should just hire a sales team and go after all these professionals. And so we did that for maybe a month or 2. And then we realized that these professionals were often not providing a good experience. And so despite the fact that this was the easy way to drive the numbers up in a short amount of time, we decided to get rid of the sales team and to make no longer the focus on professionals and not build any special tools for professionals. And that is still true today. I know sometimes we're criticized for saying there's professionals on your website, but you should know we never seek those people out. We don't have any sales team. Yes, we're a platform, all kinds of people join, and we think that's part of what makes Airbnb special. But the core of it since the very beginning has been around home sharing. And I think that was a very wise decision in retrospect. But at the time when you're looking for growth, it would be very easy to go in a different direction.
And I think, Nate, another topic is, I think probably that was 3-4 years ago, that Booking started actually to put a lot of money into them on these kind of apartments. So you could see from this perspective, Booking is a company who wants to be position number 1 in Google SEM, and they started bidding very heavily. And then you have this company who makes 2 billion every year, or a billion on profits, with a lot of free cash flow, competing and spending a lot of money. And that might be, did you actually see that as a threat, what Booking did?
Yeah, we've had a couple situations like that where competitors have raised a lot of money and spent a lot of money in a very short period of time, and it's kind of let's say an oh shit moment, right? Where you get a little bit nervous, like what should we be doing differently if they're going that extreme? With our international expansion, that was a moment too. When Windu, the local company run by the Samwers, raised $100 million, kind of came out of nowhere, and made this kind of huge concerted effort for growth. But I think we decided the one thing we would do differently is have a closer relationship with our customers. So we opened offices, we got closer to our customers through meetups and making sure we're available to them. But we otherwise kind of held true to what we were doing and just focused on doing a good job and kind of held the course, and that's really paid off.
Mm-hmm. Another question? Hand over there.
You said earlier you realized that it would be better if you would handle the payment, and so nowadays you collect the payment at the time of the booking, and then you transfer it later when the guests arrive to the host. And so I guess you must sit on a lot of cash then. And I was wondering, is that part of your business model? What happens? Do you invest that money?
Positive working capital, and what do you do with spending it?
Well, interest rates are so low, you couldn't actually make a meaningful amount of money from that. And so that money just sits separate, safely. It's not used as operating cash. It's kept strictly separate. And at our scale, there's a lot of regulation. And so we're careful to abide by all those rules. So no, it's not part of the business model. We don't make any money off of it.
Because you have many students sitting, I mean, you have a bachelor degree in computer science at Harvard, one of the best schools in the world. Can you recommend to do the dropout story if you have a fantastic idea as a student? Do it the Mark way?
I think the important thing is, are you challenging yourself? Whether you're staying at school or whether you're going your own road, how can you maximize your learnings? And for different people in different situations, there's different right answers. I don't think it's one or the other.
But how's that for you? I mean, you finished your study. If you look back to that, was it worth it to finish your degree? Because we had Jan Koum sitting here. I don't know who was here two years ago. And he said, if you have a great idea, go out, just leave school. and start your own business, and with a paycheck of 16 billion, it was easy to say it. So what is your own perspective?
Well, yeah, I had to make an interesting decision, which is I told you about that high school business that was did incredibly well, and that could have kept doing well. And after my freshman year at Harvard, it was getting too much for me to do this business, and academics were getting tougher. And the business was really just me. I didn't have a team I could really rely on. Maybe if I had more experience, I would have hired a team and trained them, but it was too late for that. And I had to make a choice. And I decided just to shut it down in the span of about a month and just fold it. And I said to myself, I've done incredibly well. I've learned a lot of personal lessons. I'm now going to take the next 4 years, like 3 years, and focus on having like the proper university experience, knowing that there's going to be many more opportunities where I can start a business and really build a business with a team. So that was a tough decision at the time, and maybe if I had decided the other way, it would have turned out fine too. But that's something I went through.
But up to now, it's in a very impressive way you did. Thank you very much for your time to be here. A big applause, please.
To share this story, and I hope it inspires and helps you to go on and do all the great things that you'll do.
I think we have some drinks out, and here, if you turn right, some drinks, and you're welcome to have a beer and to keep discussing with us. Thank you very much.